Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thomas Kohlenbach from Nintex. I would like to welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Accelerating Automation with Process Mapping, Strategies to Effectively Engage Teams in Process Automation. A couple of housekeeping rules first. Please do me a favor, mute all your lines and submit the questions on the chat area on the console. Ask your questions, we will address and post them through there, or we come back to you after the event and answer them one-on-one if needed, but I try to address them as much as I can. And lastly, the post-event survey. It would be awesome if you can all participate in that and tell us how you find the webinar content. And I'm always open for some feedback, and I'm always reflecting on myself. So therefore, please be honest and tell me what you think. Good, then let's get to it. So our agenda today, we talk about the challenges for the IT team and talking about the common objectives around these things, strategies for the engagement, and then I will clearly go as well into the tool, Nintex Promapp, and show you a little bit around how I will address these sort of challenges. A little bit more to me or to myself. I'm with Promapp, Nintex Promapp now for 8 years, so I went through the transition, have done over my time hundreds of onboarding implementation with existing customers, from global customers to small local New Zealand customers, less than 50 people. So I can hopefully share a couple of experience and as well a couple of personal experience over the last 12 months throughout the transition, coming from a business process management tool application and now having a really awesome platform on my hands to go all the way through identifying the right processes, doing the automation workflow perspective and thinking about robotics if needed, and having a clear lens from the analytical side as well. So really exciting times for us here at Nintex. So if we jump in first, and fundamentally we have just to ask really a couple of questions here. So the first question is really, what does it mean to engage the line of business? So really the people from human resources, from finance, customer service, and so on. And the second question is, why is it important to engage the line of business units? So one thing what I have seen now over the last 12 months is really sometimes the business, so the line of business unit and the IT team is a little bit like the enemy in the team, and they are talking two different languages. I obviously didn't grow up in New Zealand, thanks to my accent. I grew up in Germany, and it feels a little bit sometimes I speak German and the IT team speaks English and I don't understand a word. So these sort of things you have clearly to take into consideration. So if you look a little bit more in detail in this, so the first thing is really you need to gather the information what the business carries, because at the end of the day, they are the knowledge keepers. So they are really the subject matter experts, and they know what they are doing. Even if you potentially as an IT professional think, I see this in the background and I know better, but at the end of the day, when you work every day, even in a simple process, you know every little nitty-gritty scenario inside the process, and this can make a very decisive difference in figuring out the process and potentially look later on into the automation piece. So this comes really back down to the 101 of continuous improvement, go to the source where the work actually occurs and where the specialist can help you to share their knowledge. This is really essentially more or less the business process management, because I have seen this now over the years that really when the business performs the process management piece as well, that they really put the effort in there, they care, they apply changes. So it really supports your dream of at any given time, I find my current state process, so my repository is always up to date. So this is really what we are aiming for. And when I came to New Zealand, actually on the day today, 13 years ago, I started with Toyota Finance, and my role was to roll out Nintex Promapp there. And we engaged actually the business and makes them responsible to map all their processes out. Clearly, we had our processes documented, but in very static documentation, and it wasn't clear. And we needed to prepare for an asset finance system replacement. So we needed everyone hands-on and needed to think about how can we make this happen. And I will share this a little bit later, a little bit more in detail. Then why is it really important to engage the business? What I said before, the knowledge sits with them, but you have to be really thinking about hard how to actually do this. So the thing is why there's sometimes resistance in the line of business. They have done this before. There are people working for ages. They are potentially for example, in New Zealand, in local government, or as well in Australia. I have been exposed to people there 20 years, 25 years in the business or in the organization, and they have seen a lot of things coming and as well going. And there's a sort of resistance potentially built up there, which you have to overcome. The second one is clearly a change fatigue. This is easy to understand because we are living in a real changing environment these days. More or less every day something happens, at least every week, every month. Things are changing. New technology comes in. The chief information officer finds a new tool, applies it into the business, and everything needs to change again. So this sort of change is really battling the line of business, the business units really hard because they are not really open to it, or from a human being perspective, you find only certain people which are really open for change. Others, and if I go really deeply into myself, if my cafe is closed on a Sunday morning where I go every day, I'm really not happy. So this is my challenge what I have, but otherwise I personally got myself to the point change is an opportunity. So address this in a positive way and bring this across the line and you have to be very positive to make this happen. If as soon as you go into the negative thinking, you drag a lot of people with you and you don't achieve your goal. So this is really where John Cotter comes from, and I don't want to read the quote out because everyone from you guys can read. This is really bringing this in and we need to try to avoid really to get to this really frustrated employee state. You will have always a certain percentage of these frustrated employees, but then you have to focus on the higher percentage, which are potentially, most people refer to a 20-60-20 relationship. That means where you have 20% are your superstars, they see the benefit instantly, they are on your side. Then you have the 60% which are potentially like, we will do this because our boss told us. Yes, we will do it. So they are comply and will support the whole initiative. So you have already 80% on your hands where you can make a positive impact. And then the 20% which are really frustrated or the challengers or really the blockers sometimes, you just need to ignore them. Because at the end of the day, if this is an initiative running from an enterprise perspective, so from the real top down, from a CEO perspective, C-suite perspective, it becomes the daily work. So it becomes part of their job. So therefore, it becomes a people management scenario and not one of your problems. And what I said before, you have already 80% of employees on your hand where you can make a very positive impact. The last one is then they don't see the value. And this comes again back to you riding this initiative or bringing this initiative in. Or what I said, if it's an enterprise initiative, really, how do we get everyone to understand the value? So there is a lot of different ways to do this, but we here refer mainly to you have to explain your why. So why are you doing this? So really, and I'm pretty sure most of you guys will know Simon Sinek, the Golden Circle. This is really where it comes to. If you can transport your why and bring this whole knowledge throughout the organization, and it starts potentially, and no disrespect here, from the receptionist up to the C-level, bringing this understanding there, where is this little cogwheel influence the bigger picture? This is where really the magic happens. But you have to be ready to answer these objections. So why will this initiative succeed? So this is a scenario, what I said before, encouraging. This is really sometimes even showing empathy in these areas. And with it, this is only to overcome with a clear strategy and path of the completion. So this is really potentially having a clear idea of the timeline, having a clear impact on the business strategy, having a clear impact on resourcing, on how much time do you expect from me to do this. Then additionally, we have to do the scenario around the change impact, and this is again a great quote from John Cotter, where we have to look into how do we overcome this painful scenario? How do we creating the good vision, and how do we acknowledge with people, yes, that is scary, that's scary what we are doing here because it's a big piece of work. And I've just been recently involved in one of the global car manufacturers in the US, where they move from one ERP system to another ERP system and apply now an agile Scrum approach in their project. And this is a huge project. And from a Nintex Promapp perspective, we play a small piece there. So their approach is really, we're creating different puzzle pieces, and the program managers, they are bringing this puzzle later together. But I can tell you at the beginning, and this project was already 6 months in, no one really know if this anywhere is close that it will fit. So there's a lot of scare, uncertainty involved in these scenarios. Regarding this, not that type of change, it's really coming down to the effort and what's the effort actually, how successful is this what we bring in there. So one thing what I learned over the years, and I'm used to work for 12 years at Toyota Finance in Germany, and what I said before, 5 years in New Zealand. And in both countries, I was their continuous improvement manager and looking deeply into the Kaizen scenario, what's Toyota's DNA. And every time we were running a 90-day project, which was really designed from bottom-up approach, the first thinking was, oh, you just want to reduce headcount here. Because in the 25 years ago in Germany, it was all around business reengineering. And this was all around reducing headcounts and making through reduction of headcounts the business more effective. This is not what we are talking about. This needs to be clear to the people in the business. I'm not trying to get rid of you. I want to help you, and I need to explain to you what's in it for you. So this is really the magic what needs to happen. Yes, I can automate this piece of work for you, but you're always complaining about this, so you can actually focus on other things, and you can potentially apply a better customer service because you have a little bit more time. One thing what came and sticks in my mind quite heavily, a conversation with a local government officer who was really complaining about the stress when he goes on holiday, on leave, because he was always freaking out, literally freaking out, how much rework he has to do when he comes back, because he was a single resource. So this is really the scenario. If we can automate certain things and can then document what other people in his absence can actually help him, then he would be much more relaxed. And to be fair, it's actually a really sad scenario if someone is not relaxed on his vacation. If we move on and thinking about how can we connect to the line of business, or really to the business people, and speak their language is definitely one thing. When you are running an initiative out of an IT perspective and you are working in your technical environment every day and along, you develop a certain language. And for you, it's everyday language. For the HR or for the accounts payable officer, customer service officer, it's not. So think about how do you address, how do you communicate with them. Sometimes when I did scenarios on business process management and mapping and going out into organization and facilitating workshops, sometimes I don't even use the word process. Because actually, when you break it down into a slightly simpler language, we are writing down what you are doing and looking for things, how we can do things better. So therefore, this is continuous improvement, including business process management and business process mapping. Seek to understand their perspective. So it's really giving them a voice. And sometimes, yes, you sit there and think this is a waste of my time because you listen to all this whining and all these challenges, but that's real. So there is really the challenge and the chance there to give them a voice. As more speech mark loves they get from you, as more engaged they are, and as more help there will be for you to achieve actually your goals from an IT perspective, to look in to get a real impact on the automation piece or into the improvement efficiency increase of the process work. Ask for their knowledge. Sometimes what I experienced as well is you explain something what you are doing, so you explain the process to you, but you are so in the detail every day that you miss some things. So for example, sending out an email or filling out tables in the background or kicking off potentially an automated workflow, this sometimes gets lost. So therefore it's really important to reconfirm, going back, giving them the visual impact, and then going through the detail and confirming this. It's not a one-off settings, and the relationship building is really important is then. So this meeting in person, instead of sending an email, expecting this happen, yes, these days through modern technology, video conference is definitely doable, especially when you're in different locations. Switch the video on. Don't let it sit on a black screen with your name on it. This is not personal. People want to see you, that you care. So this empathy scenario comes in again. People want to build trust up, and trust builds only up when you build this relationship. You will have no chance to get to the real knowledge if you don't do this. To understand your approach is definitely one thing you have to do at the very beginning and making sure it's clear to everyone involved. So we have maybe two different approaches here. So one is like the enterprise approach or tech team approach. So when we are looking into the enterprise approach, it's really coming down to, yes, we have a new strategic alignment here from the C-level down. Let's say business process management becomes really important. We need to have this in the bigger approach, and it's a long-term commitment with including the whole big governance around this, who can do what, when, creating charters and rule books and all what comes with it. Then you have, on the other hand, the slightly less time-consuming approach from a total time of the project when you lead it by the tech team. So from a tech team perspective, which is really more focusing on we going through the enterprise, we are doing a process scoping with the aim to find the core processes which we want to focus on to drive potentially efficiency increase through automation, robotics, or by purely cutting out the low-hanging fruits, so the whole classic eliminating the non-value add scenarios to make the organization more efficiently operating. That's potentially easier to get started because your aim can be focused on one area or on multiple areas. You could create easily a body of work and going through the different scenarios. You could engage with the leadership team. That was my starting point when I started at Toyota Finance in New Zealand. I connected to the leadership team, to each director of the different areas, and asked them for their top 10 critical processes. So what does that mean? It's like when you go into the finance team, clearly there was invoicing, treasury, and so on. So obviously these are the big ticket items. But then you have to go in and break this further down. So it's really making this digestible because otherwise people will be overwhelmed. And for you, from a tech team leaded initiative, you can really focus on where do you see the biggest bang for the buck. So where is the biggest impact if I concentrate on this, and what can I do? And sometimes you have to realize, hey, we run this process only once a year. I don't touch this. It's not that important. Often it comes in with the built-in demand. This clearly comes when we introduce new technology, for example, a new ERP system, let's say SAP, Oracle, Dynamics, you call it. There is built-in capability. So again, we still need to understand where our trigger points, inputs and outputs sit because they stay the same. We still operate the business, except we potentially change certain services. But in general, this is quite static. Everything in between will change, can change, will have an impact. So therefore, certain things you can build inside the application straight away and can help, but then the people who are living with the new application, coming back to the change approach, they need to be trained. They need this change management area needs to be addressed because otherwise you go straight away into the uncertainty and potentially the error rate goes tremendously up. Doesn't matter how well you created the inbuilt workflow scenarios in these applications. When you think about, when we call this here on the slide, follow the process. So this is really where I think this is where it comes down to. So engage the experts, develop the clear strategy implementation plan. Involve the right subject matter experts. So this could be depending on the reach of the process you selected. So this means if it's cross-functional, does it stay in one area of the business, you might need different SMEs for it. Depending on the size of an organization, sometimes you will realize they have always the same SMEs, means in every single project they rely on the same people. Therefore, you have to be very mindful to address this and being very respectful on the resources. Again, on my personal experience, there were certain things where I couldn't have access to the leader of the customer service team on a Monday, because on the Monday there were certain functions, certain processes needed to be executed, which could be only done at this point by the lead of the customer service team. So there was no time for me to bother her with any questions. But this comes down to the company culture internally as well. Then, important as well, and communicate this quite thoroughly, design the process. What does that mean? How do I engage the SMEs? Is this clearly communicated? Then from a communication perspective, this needs to come from the top down. It doesn't help when you run an initiative as an IT specialist and you want to drive this as a facilitator, that's great. But if this is not supported from the instant reporting line and from the C-level, I would say good luck. It will make your life way harder. And then you have to provide the training and the tools. How can you help them? How can you make their life as easy as possible? Because as more engagement easy it gets for them, as more it will help you at the end of the day. One thing what comes to my mind there as well from a little side story here. We were running improvement initiatives via a morning tea for certain areas. So I invited teams in there with really good muffins and good coffee into a conference room, and then we talked about, in a very relaxed atmosphere, around the challenges, the pain points, and so on, and then started over the weeks a little bit of a post-it notes session, and then went into other more technical tools to make it easier to communicate, convey, and share then the outcomes out of the sessions. And to be fair, 50% dropped off over time because it was not really relating to their time schedule, what they had on, but I had a good amount of people where I could drive things in. Interview sessions definitely is an option. Doing this one-on-one is definitely very effective. You have just to find the right timing, because people, when they are so busy, and one person, and we see this still up to date, that one person carries all the knowledge in an organization. If this person works out, you have a huge loss of intellectual property. So therefore, this is definitely a pain point I would concentrate on when we are talking business process mapping, capturing of this information. And these people are very crucial when we are talking about looking into this whole scenario on automation. Talking about the identification of automation opportunities, what I said before, it can't be all of this. It can't be, not every single thing you touch will end into an automated process, because certain things, either it's not worthwhile to do because your effort is bigger than actually the return of your investment. And secondly, it might be better, or it might be necessary from a legal requirement to have a more manual approach than actually what technology-wise is possible. So this needs to be clearly assessed and clearly identified. Important, I would install through the whole process where you go through a feedback loop with the subject matter experts, because at the end of the day, this is your customer, and we need to get into the set space. We are working for our customer. So therefore, the voice of the customer, the feedback, the imminent criticism, if I use this a little bit more negative occupied word, this needs to be turned around, and that's my opportunity to improve this. So my best analogy in here is, again, from my own experience, I was working under a CEO where he saw every single audit finding as a personal offense. When the CEO retired and a new, younger CEO came in, his viewpoint was, every single audit finding is my opportunity to improve. So this changed the whole attitude in the whole organization. It took clearly a while because it was very negative connected to, but at the end of the day, everyone saw the benefit going into more a positive headspace. So how do we make this now work? So what do we need to provide in these scenarios? So if you're looking for an easy tool to use, so it clearly comes down to the requirements. And I can't stress this enough. You have to be very clear on your requirements. And you have to be very clear on your success criteria, what you want to achieve. Because if your requirements are clear and very clear defined, the tool selection is very, very easy. If you are vague, you will have much more tools on your hands where you potentially don't see the value in every single tool. So where I think where it should sit is really the simplistic approach, easy to accessible, online, software as a service, potentially even accessible from home. You might have scenarios where you send people home and say, hey, I give you 2 days, focus on this. If you can work from home in a more relaxed environment, do this. Or go into an office or in a meeting room and sit there, get away from your busy desk, these sort of things. From a simplistic approach, it reduces the training, it reduces clearly the type, or it increases actually the engagement. As simple as I can convey information, as more people are engaged. If I get even today, if someone gives me a 500-page document, I'm already annoyed because I know that I have to find the right spot, I have to read through all of this. If I get a simple process, potentially then I'm interested and drilled through the detail underneath. The critical success factors in this whole game is your governance. So this sits outside the tool. This is really how do you run and how do you play the game. So this is how you define all these things around what I mentioned before, success criteria, your charter, who is responsible for what, who is your executive sponsor, who is involved in this game, how is my resources applied to it, what is my expected result after month 3, 6, 9, 12. So to give you an idea how this could look like, from an BPM tool perspective, we will have a quick look what Nintex Promapp can provide you. So in this case, on a simple scenario, on the simplicity scenario, easy to comprehend, process information, process writing experience, really quickly done. And I will go through this motion in a second. Timely communication, that's quite important. What I said before, this is really get the right people around the table virtually in the tool and communicate back and forwards and talk about this and the governance around this and managing the pipeline. I forgot actually this. So this is where you identify on your journey all of a sudden the side projects and see what could happen there, or this was forgotten, and this will have a huge impact on your scope, on the project scope. So these sort of things needs to be addressed and need to be clearly communicated upstream and potentially downstream if it has an impact on your body of work from a project. So let's have a look into the tool itself. So I will just swap over now and share my screen. This will just take a second until the screen sharing comes through. So everyone should see now a Promapp instance. So we are looking now here what the landing page of Nintex Promapp looks like. So this is like performed like a website. So and important these days is really how do we communicate knowledge? What are our go-to applications these days? LinkedIn, Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, and you want to get the knowledge as fast as possible when I need this. So a good search is definitely an important thing, and it needs to be dominant that people are actually driving through this. So if I go now here and start typing that was a good start. Advertisement, it will deliver you a result inside. Oh, I'm locked out. That's the reason why it doesn't work. Give me 1 second. So I'll do this again. If I go on advertisement, it gives you straight away a selector on different scenarios regarding which processes are there. So this is very important from a search perspective. By the way, this searches as well the content of processes and will deliver you back as a search result as well the content, not the content, but the attached documents, forms, templates, and so on. Important as well is the role you play in the application. So everyone has a log-on, can be connected to single sign-on, and it defines straight away all the processes where you as a person and your connected role has to perform a step in the process, and it can be clearly derived as well as the whole accountability, responsibility, who owns this, who is responsible for these processes. If we are going now through the blue banner here, you can see, so we clearly go into the process world, but Nintex Promapp delivers you a document management function because we want to create processes as a one-stop shop. So therefore, additional information needs to be accessible. This can be done by web links. This can be uploaded, downloaded, and managed within Promapp. so that you have the document management functionality with review dates and version controls. But as well, you can link to other document management resources like SharePoint, HP Trim, Objective, and so on. Then we are working now on something really exciting on our automation integration with the Nintex Workflow Cloud Engine, which will be just released in a couple of months' time. So we watch the news there. This will be really exciting. We can have a system integration in there so that you as an IT specialist or everyone who's involved in IT can really quickly identify which system is used in which process, so you get a real understanding, okay, what happened if we go through, for example, an SAP upgrade, or what process is affected when we can't access our finance system. So this information is on your fingertips. Then very important is the dashboard notification. So this is connected down here to the process changes, document changes, and so on. So the dashboard gives you an overview, which processes are used where, what are the statuses, and more importantly, you get notified of the change, and you get notified in real time, and you can configure if you want to get this via email or if it's just through the application. Then we have a couple of add-ons, which I will not go into much detail on, but Promapp has a very unique differentiator in the risk and compliance space because we can make a risk control visible in the process itself, and I will show you a little bit how this looks like. Then we have an improvement add-on. This is more an action-generated workflow, which means if it's something simple you want to report in and you want to solve through certain actions, this can be linked back to the process and back to risk control so that you really understand what's going on to a certain scenario, which is mainly related to customer complaints and compliments, incidents, audit findings, change requests, but there are certain things which I clearly wouldn't do with it. That's, for example, bug fixes in IT. So any very granular stuff definitely wouldn't touch this. And the third one, or not the third one, the last one is really our onboarding and training, using all this exciting information for our onboarding and training efficiency within here. So let's jump into the process world from everyone who has a little bit more process knowledge from a BPM perspective. When we are talking about the different level of processes, so this would be your process level 0. So this is more your structure, and this is completely flexible. And this is just a demo site. So I have here like a department, human resources. I can already assign ownership to this. So with the process groups, there is where you connect the processes and subgroups to this. So now we are in human resources, and we see the different functions what human resources performs. If we go now in recruitment, from the recruitment side, I have now my end-to-end function, how we actually do the recruitment. And from a writing perspective within Promapp, we really try to drive this engagement through breaking down big processes in smaller chunks. So in this overview here, you have 4 processes connected to each other because we obtain the approval, advertise the position, select the candidate, and then we go into the negotiation piece. So you could have different states and with different applicants. So therefore, this is for the people working in the process is quite important because they can be very specific. I'm now working to advertise the position, then I can click in and I can see my process, how it actually looks like. So in this case here, I have the process where it comes from, and I can expense the process and can see what happened actually in the process before. And then I have these artifacts, what we call activities, which are the key steps in the process, more like your bullet point approach, what needs to be done to achieve the output or connect to the next process. So this is really where we say 3 to maximum of 10 of these activities would be ideal because this gives everyone a real easy engagement piece. So if I now want to understand how do I actually do the prepare special template advertisement, I have 2 options. Either I can click on this activity and I can see all my detail underneath and all the resources which I need, like web links or online forms and so on. One specific thing to Promapp, we develop a note function, which is like your once in a while exception, so the 20% of the case. Instead of using a decision diamond in the classic Visio style, we encourage people to use the note, because this happens only once in a while, has not a huge business impact, but it's important when it's happened. And if this triggers another process, we can even link another process in here. The other option to get to the detailed information is I can swap to the procedure view and get all the information underneath. So how would I utilize this function now from an automation approach perspective? And now it depends a little bit how your initiative is run. So if it's say we want to utilize this to identify our opportunities for automation, but we don't want to change the business right now because we still need to find the budget and need to convince our C-level, our CIO, that this is the best idea and I can make this happen for our organization. So what I did in this case, I copied this process. So this is really duplication. And so I did this in advance. So it's just a one mouse click, and it brings me into the advertised opportunity. And what I did as well, I applied what we call a process variant. So this is a process-specific variation, which allows me to build out certain scenarios, and they are endless solutions. So I just chose an as-is solution as a current state and a to-be solution, obviously, for the future state. So if we are looking first into the current state scenario, so there is where I would work with the subject matter experts, the line of business, and identify my process. So in this case here is the same process. Now we have different overlayers. So we can actually identify the active time. So this is motion study. So this is manual data entry to the process to demonstrate how long it takes. So this for the active time, 3 hours I would take for the activity number 1. Then we have the capability to go on to the wait time. So that means how long do you have to wait between activity 1 and 2. Then based on the average cost, annual cost of the role, and on the parameter in the background, in my case, 5 days a week is the working days and 8 hours a day, we can actually calculate the cost of the activity. And therefore, I have the capability, Promapp will deliver me a total cycle cost. So once the process goes through, the process costs us $572.92. Now our annual volume of the process is assumption that we advertise position 50 times a year, and the total cost of the process comes up to roughly $28,700. So this is an indicator. So we are working with average, but it's a great indicator to understand, okay, this is potentially worthwhile to think about automation. Then we have to understand what sort of IT systems are actually involved. So then I can overlay this with my systems, and on my system tab, I can highlight which system is used where, which is nice to have. What I said before, the capability is there to run a system map report over the whole database. So if I go to my system table and go to SAP and run now my system map report, this allows me to understand, in my case here, over the whole database, or I could reduce this to certain areas of the business, in which area, in which process, down to the process step, SAP is used. So therefore, it gives me a really quick understanding where do I have to act if something is not working, or thinking about disaster recovery planning or business continuity, all these good things. This will help you. Additionally, we have a secondary table, what we call, out of the box is called the lean table. You can rebrand this, I call this tagging and lean, because I want to use this not only for my classic inefficiencies of waste components. I want to use this, for example, opportunity for robotics or opportunity for improvement or automation. And again, on this table, on the lean table itself, you have endless option to record these hashtags. So this is really important when you think about the future, where do you want to go? And if I look now here on my opportunity for improvement, I can run the similar report to the system table and get my information here, in this case, on the specific one which we were in, and see which step can be or is potentially worthwhile to automate. So if I go back to the process, how this now looks like as well, I can overlap this now clearly with the lean text as well. So in the procedure text, there you can see now how this looks like. So when we are going on our hashtag, if I hover over, it explains actually what it stands for, but actively I have to position this. So I have to actively go into the system and position this. So by doing this, if I go into the edit mode, in here, I want to have this one is potentially a weighting component by just adding the hashtags. This gives me now access to the underlying table, and I can connect this now to weighting. By the way, if I now think actually I want to add another step in here, I can add an activity, and this step moves in here. Everything in here is drag and drop. If I save this now and go back to the process where we came from, you will see now due to the fact that I added another activity in here, the process changed. So there is my additional my sleeve around demonstrating decision points. Yes, we have a decision box, but it behaves slightly different. So if I go through this scenario and identify all my opportunities, now I want to build out actually how my future looks like. And keep in mind our cycle cost is 572. So if we go now to our future state, that doesn't mean that I bought some licenses for automation tools yet, but I have mapped out my scenario which I want to use. So for example, in this case, I want to use Nintex Workflow. And my last step here down, I want to introduce a bot from Foxtrot, EnableSoft, which is all available on our platform, to showcase how does that impact my future state. And due to the change, clearly the production time, the active time goes down. Therefore, my cycle cost is impacted, and I reduce roughly my one cycle down on $200. Assumed on 50 annual volume, I save roughly $14,000 or $13,000 on annual cost. There's nearly your budget, your ROI to make this happen. A couple of things I want to point out here in the future state. Due to the fact that you have an RPA, a bot applied here, I utilized our risk and compliance add-on to highlight this red triangle. This red triangle gives you the capability to manage potentially your risks, what it means if you apply bots or automations scenario or identify other compliance requirements, because if you are allowed to go into this area, which is configurable, this now defines, okay, what's my risk by applying this bot via RPA, and what's my likelihood, and how good are my controls? So my control here is actually the step in the process, and therefore I want to make sure that this control is actively managed. So I can select the process where it applies to, I can select the step in the process where it belongs in, and I can select then the people or the roles who have to tell me on a frequently basis, yes, this is actually working. So all this information comes then through the dashboard. And so this is by signing off this on a regular basis, either yes, that's working or it's not working. And you can put evidence in there, all the nice and good things, because all this history goes into our audit history file and could be available for auditors to look through. These scenarios are highly used into food safety and ISO certification, all the good things. We use this internally quite heavily as well to mitigate our risks through Promapp functionality as well. So I hope this makes some sense to you. One thing what I forgot to show you, and therefore I go back to the original process, which is the operational. So if now we go back to the right process. So I dropped this process here just on the version number. So that's quite an important scenario. So my configuration here is set up with our full, what we call the process approval workflow. That means any change, who's able to change this. So we have a clear defined process expert and owner. And you can widen the group of people who can change process. So you can bring the subject matter experts in, because what you can do everyone who can see the live process can apply feedback. Every process you now change, you can send around in the business. So if you apply this change now really quickly and we add another activity in here after the, and call this here just test webinar, and say this step is done by the role accounts payable. There's obviously a role table in the background, and then you can apply the details behind and so on. So if I save this now, this will create a subversion, a 13.1. And this is now the future, how I want to create this. And now I want to share this with my audience who is potentially not a defined user on the Promapp application. Nevertheless, I can share this. I can email this process around. I can put people's name in here. So if I put Thomas at Promapp in here.com and add this, so I can send this if I want around the world or to a wider team and put please check. What this actually now does is it sends out this URL to the recipient, and this URL, and I open up now a different disconnected browser, is an active URL. So it's not a PDF, it's not a static document. The recipient of this URL will see the real process. And depending from which status you share this URL, you can even toggle between the future state and the current state. And most importantly, you still can provide feedback even if you are not a defined user in the application. All this feedback goes then into our feedback log and can be answered, and full conversation can go on here. So if I do this really quickly out of the application, great process, you will see that from the feedback log, I will have now the capability to respond to this feedback and have actually a conversation and going back and potentially deal with other suggestions for improvement. So it becomes a real active repository driving engagement. From my ideal stage, I would let the business do the current state scenario. You as an IT specialist, if you're on the hunt for automation, you definitely could go in here and find the weaknesses in the process, looking for this efficiency driver, looking for your cost savers in here, and helping people from the line of business, from the business units to save some time on their side. On the whole digitalization transformation journey, this is gold. So you have your repository on your fingertips here. So this is where it really all starts when you come from an enterprise perspective, or you be very specific if you came from the tech perspective and hunting down these processes which really matter. I would now like to take some time to answer potential questions. So I stop my sharing. And before I do this, I recap really quickly, which I already more or less did. So line of business partnership is crucial or critical. Address the common objections to automation. You know, this is all what we talked through. Map the process with the right tool. Don't go too difficult. Visio is always on people's minds. If you're highly educated on Visio, you will be able to do this, but no one really follows you. I was one of them 13 years ago, and I thought I was really good, but I didn't get really any engagement done. This only changed when I actually understood the power of a simple tool. So that would be really the thing, what we are talking about, and clearly what I said now 50 times, improve the process through the automation, thinking about what are the right things to do in the processes to make the life easier for the people who do the work every day. So I open up the line now for question and answers, and please use the chat functionality, and I will go through some of them. So just going in here, struggle with the technology a little bit, but I will get there. Give me 1 second. So one question from Sina from Woolworths is, so in summary, tagging activities and filling out the timing and cost elements of process. Oh, sorry, I was not on the, no, it was on the, then can automate easily. Yeah, so that's 100% the way to go. As shown before. Can this be used in project estimation creation? I would say to a good degree. So that's a question from Yogita. Because there are certain components which Promapp doesn't allow to record, like cost of material, resourcing perspective. We are not, or Nintex Promapp is not a process management tool, so therefore I would be quite selective how far I would push this. I definitely think I'm a huge fan of using best of breed technology and then push it to the limits, but as long as I'm aware of where I will be disappointed. If the tool is not designed on purpose for it, I need to be prepared to be disappointed with the outcome. Then a question from Benjamin Fan. I have a BPM project in flight where the SME aren't actually experts and there are no better people in the organization. The customer is unable to think clearly, systematically, and articulates their requirements. How do you suggest I approach that? Dick and run. Now, sorry for the joke. On a serious answer there, you have to guide them through. And so you are going into the facilitation role, and you have to bring the responsible people into the room with the so-called subject matter experts. Even if the management team is potentially not that much in detail, they are taking the responsibility for it. You, as driving this BPM project, you are more need to get into the facilitation role. You can make clearly suggestions. You can clearly advise. You can showcase certain things. My view is I don't want to make the decision for them because they have to live with it. They have to take the responsibility for it. So therefore, you go really into an advisory role. If they want to see something from you, what so-called is best practice, you can clearly put something together. But again, let it be signed off. Let the people discuss around this and ask the questions. So certain things where you start potentially on a post-it note journey and let them describe the big steps in the process, and then you need to ask the more detailed questions around this. A question from Brian Elliott, more a statement. I didn't realize there was a cycle cost section. I'm not a big user. I can see a lot of benefit in actually costing the process. Thank you for pointing this out, Brian, because yes, we have from a percentage stage of the use of the cycle cost, it's not a huge uptake, but organizations which are using this are actually very happy with this. Then the last one, give me 1 second, there is a slight challenge. The last question before we have to wrap up, perhaps we missed it while having issues with the browser. Will there be a session on actual automation part, particularly with using Nintex? Okay, Eileen was just telling me who helps me with this webinar that this is answered, this question, so I don't need to go on this. And I go one last one. One question comes up, does Promapp integrate with UiPath or NetSuite? Depending what integration, your expectation of integration is. The URLs which I showed you, you can utilize in any IT system which can store a URL, so you can make the processes visible. So it gives you an easy access point. Actively integrating that information or data flows from one system to the others, no, it doesn't. So therefore, that will be a clear, easy no for this. So just cautious on the time. I stopped my questions here. We come back to you separately. So where do we see the next steps happening from here? So reach out to your partner or account managers to learn more about it. Download the free trial of Nintex Promapp. So when you go to promapp.com, you will have a capability to start there and sign up for a free trial, and visit the Learning Central and get familiar with the tool and concepts. So in this area there, you will see obviously the whole Nintex platform, and will hopefully get really excited, or as excited as I am, what actually the platform has to deliver to you. Other than that, nothing is left for me to say. Thank you for your time. I much appreciated it. Thank you for your engagement with all these questions, and I hope I will talk soon to you, or will see one or another. Thank you for that. Goodbye.